All right, Alex writes in, my remodel project, we're going to get back to double stud walls here, fellas. My remodel project has double stud walls and deep roof rafter bays. I plan on insulating with dense packed cellulose, but this will be my first time. Per the internet, the netting that the installers use allows air to pass through while also keeping the cellulose in place. I assume this is necessary for the installation. My project also has a mezzanine for a bit of additional interior space. Because a smart vapor retarder installed on the inside of the walls is my primary air barrier, it had to be installed first to make air sealing easier around the mezzanine ledger and interior partition walls. I was hoping not to fur out the rafters, which would impact headspace above the mezzanine. Discussions with other contractors makes me think I should do some sort of furring to avoid potential drywall screw pops. Finally, there's a rain screen on the exterior wall, and I've made every effort to control air on the interior and exterior where possible. I know there are concerns in cold climates with the double stud walls and vapor retarder placement. There was a period where I stopped listening to the podcast because of anxiety of finding out I did something wrong. I'm over that fear, but let me down softly if I've made a big headache for myself. So before I ask some of Alex's specific questions to you guys, this project, I'm not used to the term mezzanine, but essentially he has a loft. And the loft is built with a ledger attached to the stud walls. So I believe what he's telling us is that he ran his membrane, air and vapor membrane, up the walls before he installed that ledger to have continuity there. And so I think so that's important. And I think he's sort of thinking with his interior partitions and with this mezzanine ledger, he's sort of thinking similar to how the approach is often taken when airtight drywall is done in a house as the main air barrier, where you generally try to get that drywall, that airtight drywall installed before things like partition walls. So let's take his questions one at a time. I think we already kind of addressed this, but I'd love to hear your opinions on this. He's in Minnesota. Do I need a vapor retarder with double stud walls in a colder climate, specifically in Minnesota?
Minnesota, the building code, that's climate zone 6 and 7, and the building code is going to require a vapor retarder of some sort. Even though you're double stud, your thick wall, your sheathing is still a condensing surface. So what they want to do is control any moisture that has the ability to move through that assembly and come in contact with that cold sheathing. Now, does it need to be a membrane? That's going to probably be dependent on your code official. Some you cannot talk out of not using a membrane. I would not use poly. Poly is very common in Minnesota. Don't use poly. But if you can talk your building official into using a good vapor retarder paint, and you're willing to maintain a consistent humidity during the wintertime of that 30 to 35%, that should be all you need. But again, it comes back to that code official. They may not allow you to do that. At that point, you're going to have to use I would use like CertainTeed's membrane, a product like that. That should work fine.
Yeah, so he can rest easy in this case that he has not done anything wrong especially if he's using a smart vapor retarder like membrane or Intello. He's not done anything wrong there, and it's in the right place on the interior, warm in the winter side of the walls. So what about his question about installing the airtight membrane before installing the cellulose? Can you blow cellulose into a wall with an airtight membrane installed?
Our dense pack guy doesn't like doing that. He will, but it complicates the install so that that netting that he talked about earlier is so ridiculously inexpensive, there's no reason not to do it, is where my insulation guy typically falls. So they'll do their standard install, and then we'll actually have our carpentry team install something like an Intello over that. Our insulation guy will use the CertainTeed membrane product that Randy mentioned before and have his guys do that. But like on that house Brian referenced, that's going to come up in a future issue. That one we had our carpentry team install Intello over that netting after the dense pack install.
Yeah, the issue gets to be when you're trying to dense pack without that pressure relief.
Yeah.
All that air's got to come back out the hole that you're trying to blow through, and it's a dusty process. You're trying to keep a rag or something around the hole to keep it from going all over the place, but it's tough. And they do that. I mean, you think about dense packing a wall on an existing home. The contractors have done that for years. They just drill one hole and they stick the hose down and start dense packing, and it's a little messy, but it's possible. But that's with two very rigid materials, and even then they have drywall pops. With the membrane, it's not going to stand by itself. It's going to pull through. That's a pretty fragile material. It will pop through the fastening system on that.
Well, then I know that Alex has got that membrane installed already because he shared pictures. So Alex, we'd love to. We're hoping that it goes well for you, and I'd love to hear how it goes for you, and if the installer is able to get a successfully and appropriately dense packed cellulose, because there is a pressure that they try to hit when they're dense packing. And then how about the question about the large volume cavities? When you have double stud walls, if you don't do anything specific, you have one giant cavity to fill. So Ian, you did double stud walls in your house. Did you do anything?
Did it myself, yeah.
You dense packed them yourself, right? So Did you do anything to limit the cavity size that you were filling?
I did. So I talked to Dan Colber when I set out to do this, and I think I did. It was either 4 or 6 feet, and I just took plywood scraps and nailed them up the insides of the studs. But the piece of advice that Dan gave me that I found to be super useful was to loose fill all of the cavities before actually putting the dense pack nozzle on the hose. And I think it cost me a little bit of the pounds per square foot goal that we were shooting for. I think typically the dense pack is somewhere around 3.5 pounds per square foot, if I'm not mistaken. And I think I calculated it out at I got 3.1. So I didn't quite get the full pressure, but it did make the job a lot easier to pre-fill them loose and then dense pack my way up.
Mm-hmm.
How did you dense packed the whole wall?
No,
loose?
I did lifts.
Oh, okay.
So I did lifts inside of the stud areas that I sectioned off. So I think if I remember right, I did 6 feet up, whatever I could reach standing there or standing in one spot on the ladder. And then I dropped back down, put the dense pack nozzle on, and fed the dense pack into the loose fill.
Okay. That go okay? I know sometimes that's a little hard to get that driven.
It was challenging. That was one of the tougher 2 weeks of that project, I must admit, Randy. I think I've got some great pictures of the inside of the house just looking like a bomb went off in there, because you guys brought it up before, but never having done that, I did not really have a concept of that the air still has to come out of the assembly somewhere. So when stuff just started blowing all over the place, I thought I did something wrong.
I have heard advice from people who do double stud walls regularly with dense packed cellulose that, every so many feet, 4 feet, 8 feet, you just run some plywood, but between the two walls to block off
exactly what I did.
To block off the cavities. The installer came to my house and said, and I asked about that, and they said, my house is fairly small, and they said with all, you have very little places where you don't have the wall interrupted by a window or a partition,
right.
And they said, we think we're fine here. We don't see any really vast areas that will be challenging to fill. So, and all my windows had bucks around them and whatnot. So it seemed to go just fine here. And then last question here is, and I think we can say this, that there's no concern here if the cellulose is installed well, but, drywall pops with cellulose. And it is something that I I hear pretty often people saying if the cellulose installed, and the walls are bulging, the drywallers will just push the drywall up against the wall the best they can, and you'll end up with screw pops. What do you guys think about this? And should he has specifically for some reason about the roof, should he be strapping the roof to prevent drywall pops?
Personally, I would probably strap the roof, even if it's with 3/4, just to, it's not just the wall is just hanging upright. You got something hanging upside down now. So now you have it wanting to try to pull off, and then you're adding weight or pressure behind it to try to push it off. Personally, I would, if it were me, I would have strapped it, even though you might be limiting headroom a little bit with 1.5 inches and then run all my electrical inside.
Yeah, exactly.
You get that much more of an air tightness, better air tightness effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I hadn't built my house during COVID when, 2x4s were like $15, I probably would have done that detail, Randy.
All right, Alex, you heard it here. Strap that. You're going to lose a little bit of headroom, but strap that ceiling if you want to avoid drywall pops.
And get a heavy roller and roll the walls before the drywall goes up. That is a mission critical part of a dense pack install.
Yes, for sure.